Welcome to episode 35 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. For this week, I'm going to discuss a lot of interesting topics about, again, practice management, how to deal with tricky questions, national issues in the practice of immigration law, and issues dealing with clients, especially those that are here unlawfully, and many more topics, including technology and the use of scanners, and many other topics. Without further ado, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Well, thank you for joining me in. I wanted to give a special thanks out to Kim O'Kane, Fernanda, and Stephanie T for contacting me and being in communication with the podcast. They shared a lot of good information, good ideas, and I got to speak with a couple of them and have a really interesting conversation and learn about what's happening in their neck of the woods. Start off, Kim told me about the Sheriff's Department in Virginia, which is apparently holding on to detained immigrants that have issues, and they're holding up for ICE. Now, you know, I'm in California, Los Angeles, they're not doing this, but in various states, they're actually essentially federalizing the police force to hold and detain immigrants or those who they believe are here unlawfully until ICE can come and pick them up. Furthermore, ICE is doing these raids, but they're only using the terminology of police on their clothing, which creates an issue of mistrust and distrust between the local population and police forces because they can't decipher if they're coming in for immigration purposes or not. So we'll see what kind of effect this has on the population of these cities. I remember when Arizona had this happen, there was an evacuation of sorts of people that had immigration issues from that state. Is that going to happen for Virginia? What's that going to do with employment, restaurants, all that kind of stuff? It's a case study. We'll see what happens. Also, apparently, Virginia sheriffs have said they detain people based on a removal warrant, so something issued by immigration courts, not just probable cause. So these are big changes happening under the current administration. It looks like it's going to be much harsher with regards to people that are here unlawfully than it was before, despite the record number of deportations that were going on under President Obama's reign. Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk about things getting more harsher. One of the biggest ones was about CBP searches when people are entering the United States, searching their electronics and stuff like that. The CBP released a statistic recently saying they've only searched the electronics and such of 0.008% of the people traveling, which kind of makes sense because of the record numbers, millions and millions of people visiting the United States. So when we do hear stuff about this in the news, it is somewhat anecdotal, but even that's kind of harsh, especially the samples that are coming out. So it just because it's a small number doesn't mean people shouldn't be diligent and push back when necessary. But in the grand scheme of things, it is still a small number if those numbers are to be believed. But on the worst side of it, CBP officers are leaving in record numbers for various reasons, but there's got to be a negative and low morale in the whole system when you have, executive orders coming in overnight and forcing them to be the bad guys. Because obviously, not every CBP officer is this guy or gal that wants to go and bother people. It might be random ones in there. A lot of them think themselves, and rightfully so, as police officers trying to enforce justice and keep the country safe. But when they force them these difficult positions where they have to, attack the public and they have a horrible PR machine, so they bear the brunt of all the negative comments and interactions with the public because of political decisions. It's easy to see why they wouldn't want to continue in this role. It's a big toll it plays on them on a daily basis. So on one end, they're losing employees. On the other, the government wants to increase CBP numbers and ICE numbers. And to do that in a fast pace, as I talked about in a previous podcast, they can't hire fast enough to overcome this, to make up for the lost numbers, let alone increase them. So what's going to happen? Well, standards get lower. And that's the biggest worry in all of this. And on the podcast, I talked about this and about just a general timelines and information about hiring, for example, a CBP officer. So what are they going to do? They're going to lower the standards, the polygraph test, and other requirements. So it's just going to make things worse because the level of officer that's going to be coming into play here and participating in this aspect of justice and protection of our country is starting at a lower level. And when those interactions are so personal and people feel so violated, what is the quality of the person doing that? How much can we trust them? And what does it do to other people who have been hired at higher standards? All of a sudden their coworkers don't have the same standards. How are they going to feel? Are they going to stay or are they going to leave? And also CBP especially is a very risky position to have people you can't fully trust. And not to say that just because they're lowering standards you can't trust these people or they're not as good. But at the end of the day, these were the standards for many years, and to lower them is saying something. Now, CBP has billions and billions of dollars in interactions that go through their ports, and it's well known since before the Romans and Persians and Chinese of thousands of years ago, the border officers were always getting rich off the dole, like getting bribes and money and stuff like that. So we have to have the highest quality people at the border. Because in every country, in all the history, border officers have been known to control the ebb and flow of business and traffic of people. And, it could affect drugs for agricultural reasons, smuggling, all sorts of aspects they have power over at the border, which is, a security zone, which anything goes. They essentially are the king of that area. So by lowering standards, it's a very dangerous thing when it comes to, the quality of life of people coming and going and trade. And President Trump, when he puts himself as the trade president of increasing trade, I mean, wants to pass all these tariffs and border taxes. Okay, that's not a big business-minded person, but the effect of not having quality people at the border, and which could create more restrictions, more problems, is something that's very risky that we've got to be mindful for. But moving on from that, Kim also talked about an issue she faced in her neck of the woods. And it's really important as immigration attorneys, especially if you're starting out, to think about is how to question clients and get information. The example is, a client comes in and they have an issue that they may be shy about talking about, or you as the attorney need to talk with them about. But it's a touchy subject. It could be involved with sex, it could be involved with personal family life, disease, very personal stuff about life, touching upon abuse, violence, and all sorts of stuff. And you need that information. You have to have that information to be able to represent your client properly. Even if at the end it comes out that the issue is not a big deal. I have a client right now with domestic violence in his history, and it's very hard for the family to talk about that. But I need to know. I can't go on with the case without having all the information. And Kim talked about how it was difficult for one of her colleagues to get that. But it's really important because you got to always remember, and this is I learned from experience from being hit by not asking the proper questions when there were holes in the story, but not wanting to push it out of fear of hurting a person's feelings or getting involved in stuff. I wish I could cite case examples, a couple of these, where I had to push and actually make the person cry, but I had no choice because the officer would do the same thing during the adjustment interview. So I had to do it myself to know what's going on. But for example, well, actually going back, you have to ask because it's in the interest of the client to know the information. The last thing you want to do as a person who may have been abused or had some sort of story background that is so hurtful that they can't talk about it, to have them relive it in front of an officer and actually lose an immigration benefit because of it. That's a double whammy that you don't want people to go through. For example, I have a colleague of ours, does immigration, does a lot of T visas, in particular T visas for Koreans coming to the United States that are young women, mostly young women, forced to come here. Or actually not forced, they're led to believe that there's work, modeling gigs, all this kind of stuff when they enter the U.S. And once they enter, their passports are taken away, they're locked in a room and turned into sex slave prostitutes. And this is rampant, especially in Los Angeles. So, I don't want to go further than that, but when you go to Koreatown and stuff, you're going to see this happening if you use certain services and stuff. There's more to the story behind it. I'm sure there's a lot of other communities, but I know for a fact about that system because my colleague actually does cases on these. And so I asked him, I'm like, well, how do you get into this about, how the person came and all of a sudden got involved with this? And it's pretty horrific. Just to keep it brief, they come here, they wide-eyed, happy, they're coming to Hollywood, and all of a sudden, the pimp comes, abuses them to get him accustomed to the system, violent, sexually, physically, all that kind of stuff. And then once they become just a slave, and they just do what it needs to be done at that point. They don't know anyone here. They don't know the language. They have no backup. They're afraid. There's like threats of death to them and their families. So they fall in line, just like many people would. So of any other origin. So I said, well, how do you ask that? Because it's such a touchy subject. Go ask, okay, so tell me about the first time you were abused. What happened exactly? And it's like in asylum cases too, because you got to go in the details. The officer might ask the details many, many times. Back when I used to do asylum, I've had like political prisoners that were men that were sexually abused in prison as part of their torture, male on male rape. And that's a very uncomfortable thing to talk about. But I have no choice. I got to get the details out because the officer's going to talk about that. And maybe the judges if they're going to go to immigration court. So what he said is like, the first 1 or 2 times it was uncomfortable, but after that, especially in that case, it was the same story over and over again. It was just like, okay, that's the next thing. What's the next? And it's very important to not to bring down the tragedy of what's going on, but to just make it normal. There was some sort of documentary film I saw about like the adult industry or something like that, and the person that would like, and it wasn't adult industry. I think it was just like movies when there was maybe a sex scene and stuff, and it showed like you can't tell the people with the next scene and go up to them and be like, could you like take off this clothing? If you say it with shame, you're gonna make them feel ashamed, and then they're gonna make the whole scene awkward, and they're gonna be uncomfortable because that's you judging the person, judging that this is wrong, and being embarrassed to tell them. So then they're embarrassed to do it too because they've been judged. And it's the same thing. If you're judging the situation when you're talking to a client about a very touchy, violent or sexual violent or these kind of episodes, and if you feel embarrassed, ashamed about it, that person is going to feel ashamed and embarrassed. They're not going to communicate. They're going to shut down, and you're not going to be able to do a proper attorney intake, and it might destroy that attorney and client relationship because you're judging that client right there. It's got to be totally numb. It's got to be just neutral. Get the facts in, get the facts out. No judgment of the facts. And in fact, there should be no judgment as the attorney. You're there to defend the person, get the facts, and then figure out how to defend them in their interests. And that's the key right there. Nothing should bring shame. I had a consultation with somebody, and when I'm talking to a client, and this is why people badmouth attorneys, but they don't appreciate what we do, is just because like sometimes, we might have clients that might not be the best. It's not our job to judge them. It's our judge to seek justice for that person to the extent it's possible. And to do that, we have to shut that off to be a good lawyer. If you are judging the person, and to a certain extent, I don't take certain cases because there are some big judgments I'll do. But here or there, you got to accept and not do it. I had a client that came in. We did a consultation, talked about this horrible crime situation, and was wondering the effect on naturalization. And so, like, I just talked and analyzed it. Consultation's done. I came home, and then it hit me what the person had told me they had done. And I was just like, whoa, like, damn, I can't believe I like shook hands with that dude. So, but it just during a consultation, it's not something to think about. I'm here to protect the person's interests, give a neutral understanding of the law to them, and let them decide on what they want to do next, not to sit and judge them. And that's the trick, how to talk about these things or ask questions to people, is have no judgment, negative or positive. Just analyze the facts as they are. And that's something that comes with time. You got to do it a couple times. But it's really important. I'm sure every practitioner who's listening to this has gone through this process, especially in immigration, because people come from such varied backgrounds. Like you have cases where, even simple marriage cases, where all of a sudden you talk about, so have you been married or divorced before? And they get really uncomfortable, and then it comes up all these issues and cheating and all this kind of stuff. It's just a mess. But it happens, so you got to be prepared for it. Now, moving on. So, naturalization. I had a couple of episodes back where I talked about the delays in naturalization for cases that had the IOE designation for the field office, not the field office, but the lockbox center or whatever at the beginning, having massive delays. So I'm having my IOE cases getting scheduled now, and I'm actually having cases. I had one naturalization case filed 6 weeks ago that just got notice that they're going to be interviewed. So it's just crazy. I have only one case left from these IOE batches, just all my naturalization cases from more than 2 months ago that haven't been scheduled. Actually, I have two. So I have one from last summer, I think June I filed, and I had an IOE designation, and it's still not up. June 24th is when I filed. when I go to the USCIS website, it says June 20th is where they're looking at right now, which is, these average numbers are just garbage. I have clients or people consultations call me and say, oh, the website says this. I'm like, forget the website, it's worthless. But I can't complain until that June 24th day is passed to file some sort of complaint to USCIS. So it's very frustrating. I've emailed and called the field offices in Los Angeles district, in the LA district, and nothing's gone through. But it's unfortunate. Hopefully it'll come up, but that's very stressful for the client, especially from my end where I know like all these other cases are getting scheduled and they're not. I have another one I filed in December, and that one hasn't been scheduled either, but I've had stuff I filed in February that have. So it doesn't make sense, these timelines. I mean, the cases are pretty clean cases, especially the one in December. There's like that's like a simple NATS case. Like it was too easy. So there's no reason for them to delay it any longer. So this inconsistency in time, it's got to be dealt with because it creates a bad customer service experience. So I don't think that can be done for that. And just mentioning to them, they're not going to want to listen to it. Actually, there's a meeting USCIS has, a district meeting. I was debating, should I bring it up or does it matter? Or will it just create animosity between the lawyers and the district? So as I was one of the things, I didn't bother saying it, but I'll see how the mood is during the district meeting. Now, let's see. Statistics. So there was a release of some information by USCIS of statistics of the employment-based categories. Actually, family-based was in here too, but I didn't really look at it. I looked at the employment-based stuff. And it's really important to look at this, just interestingly for us as an immigration attorney, especially if you do business immigration, to know. But what makes it really interesting is if you're marketing, it's good to look at which market are you going for, especially if you're going to be a business-based practice. What's it worth we could go do EB1s and focus and advertise in France a lot, but there's not that many French EB1s coming through. Now you go in China and do that, and you'll be somewhere. So let's look at this. Employment first preference. It has these statistics, and I didn't read the whole thing, so like the way they broke it down is pretty complicated. But just breaking down the numbers of the countries that are applying, it could give you a good idea. So for EB1s, and this includes all three EB1 categories, China is like the largest group that has EB1 category applicants. So it's China, let's say 30%. Second to that is India at 7.6. So China's already multiples of India in the first preference category, hogging up almost a third of the category. So, I don't really have a Chinese-based practice, China mainland, but I'm sure a lot of the people doing EB1s are doing that. Next is India, then South Korea, closely behind India, and then at this point 7.65%. A lot of these countries I'm going to mention the same. So United Kingdom, Great Britain and North Ireland, Venezuela, which is interesting, Canada, Iran, and then when we go to Brazil, it drops to 2.9%. So Iran is interesting because I do a good number of Iranian cases, and I see them constantly coming. So just this statistic right here shows there's Canada is a little easier because, it's spread out probably because they speak English, but a lot of Iranian EB1 candidates want an Iranian attorney that speaks their language and can analyze their case better. So it's interesting that, the number I get kind of makes sense that there's such a large number relative to all the other countries in the world from Iran. So when, for example, if you're marketing that you're an EB1 attorney, China is the way to go, India, South Korea. I just speak the language of Iran, so I get that. But speak Spanish in Venezuela, that's a great one, especially with the inflation scenario there. People are trying to get away from that country. It is a great market. And then, South Korea being number 3 at 6.1%. There's got to be Korean attorneys that are just eating that up. That's great business right there. The EB2 category, India is actually number 1, 66.9% waiting list. So they're by far the biggest preference category. People using the preference category, followed like 9% by China, then South Korea, Philippines. But on the EB3 category, Philippines tops it, followed closely behind by India. Moving on, the fun part is EB5. So EB5 obviously is pretty much a Chinese visa, but it's more than a Chinese visa. It's a East Asian visa. So Hong Kong, Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, they pretty much soak up 90 plus, maybe 95% of the people getting these kind of visas. So when you talk about marketing, Iran does have a decent number of EB1s, but it's, when you say decent, it's nowhere near any of these East Asian countries. So that is the market, and that's why I see, ILW and all these different organizations, EB5 magazine, all these kind of stuff, they're constantly plugging the East Asian market. That really is where the money is. There's talk about, it's shifting in like India getting more and Russia, Brazil, but in reality, that's not happening. I had actually another chart here about visas coming in. Let's see, this is from the State Department about visas granted for various nationals. Even here, it's China, Vietnam, South Korea, China, Taiwan born. So Brazil is like 1.5% the India and Russia. So it's minuscule. I mean, if you're an individual immigration attorney, get one of these, yeah, I mean, 185 is big payday. But in the grand scheme of things, they're nothing compared to the East Asian number, especially mainland China. So that's where the market is, and that's where you got to go if you're going to be EB5 practitioner. Talking about business, L-1Bs had an interesting, and I'm going to do a whole podcast. I put it off, but I'm going to do one just by L-1Bs AEO decision. But there was there's a policy memorandum coming from USCIS called Matter of I-Corp. And essentially it was an L-1B, and the director had originally denied it for some other reason, but then AEO took it up. And this is just one of those things, I remember when I talked about L1As, I did a show about that. I was kind of blasting the people who file these L1A appeals. And I'm like, I think to myself afterwards, don't be so harsh on practitioners. There's 101 reasons that they may file it. They may have to give it a shot or whatever the client really wants it. But it's frustrating when I see them, like, especially when like this bad precedent happens. So this is what happened. And I'll review more detail next time. I did a quick glance of it. But this person files L1B, originally doesn't get approved because they're not accepting that, excuse me, it's a proper job. AEO says, forget about that. The L1B person was going to be paid in the U.S. and was from Malaysia, 43,445 MYR, it's Malaysian Real, or ringgits. So when you convert that into dollars, that's per year salary, it comes out to $13,467.95 per year, or $6.47 per hour. So they're making less than the minimum wage in the U.S. as a specialized knowledge employee. The director did not notice this. The attorney who filed this, and I'm guessing it's the attorney who filed it, didn't notice this. And this goes in the record. So AEO comes back and says this is crazy and issues a policy memorandum on this. Okay, so it was denied, whatever, stupid. But now we just gave ammo to the people who keep talking about these employment-based categories, that they're abusing the American workers by bringing in low-income people, and then have this official case that they could bring up. Center for Immigration Studies is going to be blasting this for sure, that there's people filing L1Bs and the director isn't noticing these first, that they're paying less than minimum wage for this, and it's an official document out there. So this did a great disservice to the whole practice for even filing an appeal of this. It's just so ridiculous. It did a huge disservice for the person, for all our practitioners, the person who filed this AEO. No matter what money they got, they ended up hurting the whole practice field. This is the kind of disappointing stuff I see constantly in appeals practice. Appeals, what is motion reopen, reconsider, appeal of decision AEO. So this is what was sad. And looking at it now, if you look at the news, Donald Trump has posted 2 of these hardcore, anti-immigrants, immigration, think tank people into key places in DHS, USCIS, Center of Immigration Studies, and then this other group, FAIR or something like that. And so these guys, the people in charge of immigration, don't like immigration. And we just added a public policy memorandum at the L1B, who's already, they give so much difficult time. Already there's so much problems. Now they're just going to say this all day. Oh, L1B people are coming here and paying less than minimum wage. Is this kind of stupid appeal stuff that leads to bad precedent and very embarrassing work, and that frustrates me when it comes to the immigration practice and the quality of these appeals and the quality of the attorneys who even don't analyze these little nuanced parts. It's not even that hard. You got to analyze this person's getting paid $6.47. As a human being, how would you even want that to happen? Like, come on, how are they going to live in the U.S.? That means there's slave labor coming here. For sure, they're going to abuse that employee somewhere. And so I'm glad the AEO caught it. It shouldn't have gotten approved in the first place, but the attorney should have caught it and say, come on now, pay this person a decent wage or don't bring it. This doesn't make any sense. Sorry to get frustrated like that. One quick note, I think I talked about this before, but USCIS issued some special instructions about B1, B2 visitors who are then changing status to F1. And they're talking about you have to be in status or the school has to start within 30 days of your status ending. And to bridge that gap, if it's happening, you got to file for, an extension of status, file another I-539. I don't touch these cases because it seems like a mess. And for me to do them, it will cost so much money that it's not worth it. So I say, there's other firms to do it or whatever, but I don't take on B1, B2 changes of statuses. If they want to do F1 overseas and they really want just someone to help them out, rarely I'll take it on, but I just don't bother to change the status. Let's see. Oh, another thing. There's charts of how many federal prosecutions are happening, and pretty much it's dominated by immigration practice of deportation removal prosecutions. So it's just crazy. The federal government's whole job on the justice end is going to deport people and take on all the crimes, all the New York banks doing this stuff. That's nothing. They're going after small potato, mom and pop, unlawfully immigrants, but letting all the nonsense and corruption go away. So it's just a mess when you look at the federal apparatus for enforcing laws, going after these stuff. Oh, in annoying news, USCIS just updated Form I-129F. That's for fiancé visas, I-526 for EB-5, and the I-290B, as usual, they're just making them longer and asking more questions. But it's so frustrating when they switch up these forms and they constantly change them. You got to be so mindful and check the website. It's super annoying that they're doing this, and they do this on a fly. And what's most annoying is they change forms. Like the I-485, they changed it, but it's exactly the same thing. They changed the number at the bottom. There was another one they changed like this. There's no changes, but it's just a change in one number, and then that's that. Why would you even do that? Especially because the previous form had expiration date that was past the date that they would be renewing for, like a year or so after it. So those are my gripes. This podcast is turning me just complaining like an old man about stuff. But overall, I am optimistic. Good cases are getting approved. They're moving forward. Immigration is happening. I think in early May, they're going to be having another hearing on the executive order regarding the travel ban. We'll see what happens. That's probably going to just be kicked up to the Supreme Court as President Trump keeps wanting to push the issue on it. And who knows how that's going to go. But it's frustrating because I have clients that come in, want to do E2s, want to do like K1 fiancé visas. And they're like, can we do it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen next month. I would say if you're going to do a K1, get started as soon as possible. If you're going to do an E2, get started as soon as possible. Because maybe you'll get in before any decision's made and you'll be in. Now, thinking about that, the executive order says visas not issued before the date it went into effect won't count. So if someone does get a visa and then it goes back, will those be undone? I doubt it. That would seem unfair. But these kind of issues it makes it frustrating. Again, I'm going back to the frustration. But I guess any area of law you practice, our job is to deal with people's problems. So it's inevitable. It's in the cake of being a lawyer that you're going to deal with frustrating issues. So it's more not as much frustration, it's just sadness that people have to go through such. When the situation with the executive order and then the subsequent waivers potentially come into play for overruling the executive order or getting a special permission visa to come in, I just thought it sucks so bad because clients are already paying me a bunch of money to do the work, and then out of nowhere they just added a bunch of work for the waiver that has to go in. And so I put myself in their shoe. I'm like, damn, I got to pay all this extra money to deal with the waiver. And then it's going to be so subjective whether it's accepted or not. It's still not clear what the rules would be. Even the consular officials are going to get frustrated because they're like, oh, just create additional work. You already have so many numbers of people coming. They're cutting their funding. It's just a grind that they're putting everyone through. And I guess it makes sense just stopping immigration. But I just can't see how a logical, reasonable person will look at the history of the United States and the world and think immigration is a bad thing. Now, you can pick and choose. Some immigration partners might have bad stuff. Some countries or cultural groups, their opinion might be bad. But in general, the idea of immigration is just the free movement of people. And so that's always something that's frustrating me. People across borders, the regular people, if you're listening to this, you're probably not in the 1%. If you're listening to this, that means you're working in immigration law. And if you're working as a lawyer, no matter how much money you're making, you're still working. So you're not part of that clique that's on top. we have more in common with everyone else in the world, every country, than we do with the leaders in our country. The leaders of every country, that mafia has more in common with themselves. So it's funny how we get on one team with them just because we're on this side of the border when we have everything that's different. Like there's a movie, The Godfather, which is probably one of the greatest movies / philosophical movies, everything ever. It's definitely, I've watched it probably, I mean, literally like 75, 80 times. There's a scene in there, especially Godfather 1, where they're talking about, drugs being sold in the U.S. and the Godfather doesn't want it to happen because he doesn't believe in drugs, but the rivals do, and there's a war going over turf, all this stuff happening. And eventually they come to an agreement about what's going to happen. And it's interesting because they're sitting at a big table, these top people, they're leaders of their industry, leaders of the city of New York and all that kind of stuff, and pretty much the country. And so at the end they hug, and whatever differences they have over fights, they're fighting about money, but they're clique, their group, they have more in common with them between each other, and they have to watch out for each other's interests in the day than they do with the regular people that are around them. So that's something to be mindful of. And when you deal with somebody, it's hard to explain this to somebody who doesn't want to listen, but when you're looking at people across the border coming in, we have more in common with these people than we do with our own leaders, either on a local level or any type of level. So it's just such a hard thing to look at them as the other and want to push them away and push them back and not have them be part of our communities and to just accept them. Now, obviously, you can't have big numbers of people rushing in. It's a big change. The social safety net, the welfare systems can't handle it. And that's a valid complaint. It is something to think about and to talk about, to discuss, and to enforce, in my opinion. Now, I'm sure a lot of immigration attorneys don't think that at all. But that's a easier thing to discuss and reach a conclusion to that we all can agree with than just some absolute no immigrants or immigrants are bad. But I'm preaching to the choir if you're listening to this. Moving on, some practice stuff. Let's see. I just got a scanner for the first time. Before, I've always been using my printer scanner, which is for years the dumbest idea I could have had ever. I had an Epson scanner. I was using the Epson printer that had a scanner on top, and it would take a minute to scan like 5 things, and then it would freeze, and then I would save it. It was a hot mess. And I bit the bullet, and I got a ScanSnap IX500 Fujitsu scanner. I think it was like $400 or something like that. And to be honest, if now looking back, if it was 2000, I should have got it. I should have got it years ago, whatever the price. I could feed it like 100 pages, and within less than a minute, it scans both sides of them, organizes it. Clear scans. I could get the words, and it's readable PDFs. Low file size. Like, I had like 10 pages, less than a megabyte. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe I wasted so many hours of my life on this crappy scanner when I had good ones. Now, for big stuff, the office has like one of those big scanners that's really expensive, and so I would go and do that, but they would charge, I don't know, 20, 25 cents a scan. And the scan quality wasn't that good, and the feeder would miss pages and all that kind of stuff. Now I could really move on to become a digital office. So if you haven't done it, if you're an immigration attorney, we deal with paper, you're going to make money by buying one of these scanners. Now, I'm not sure if this scanner is the best one or not. I just got it yesterday. So far, so good. And if it goes bad, I'll let you know. But this Fujitsu ScanSnap had good reviews, and IX500. And it has a wireless capability, all this kind of stuff. It's really neat. There's probably more stuff I could do with it that I don't even understand. But I went to like some sort of mixer. I got 10 business cards. So I put the business cards in it and scanned it immediately, even though they're thick, both sides, and then made some organization with them, all this kind of stuff. Read the information on it and made a contact list. I'm like, oh my God, this is a genius. No wonder the machines are going to take over. I can't believe it did all of that. So that's something to do. With regards to the podcast, so I used to post the video version of my podcast on my law firm's YouTube page, but I thought, clients or people who aren't lawyers don't want to have this mix in their feed who are subscribers on that channel. So I made a separate channel called youtube.com/the Immigration Lawyers channel. And so I'm going to post these podcasts. I'm buying video equipment so I could have better visual on it. And you might have seen the last one I did. The quality is still not to where I want it to be. The lighting, I have special lights to make things look better, but I forget to turn them on. And then I had the just regular room light, so it didn't look as good. And I got to get used to doing this stuff. I have a team. I have a video production team, if you see my other videos, who do that stuff. But going there and doing all this stuff is such a hassle. I'm like, these podcasts where I'm just sitting talking, I want to be able to do that at home. And then on the channel, do quick news stuff about just immigration stuff for immigration lawyers and talk about it. And then the other high production stuff or that I'm going to do, I'll do with the team. But you'll be seeing that coming. So definitely subscribe to youtube.com/the Immigration Lawyers channel. I'll probably have a link or something like that you can reach. That's about it for today with regards to news and office stuff. One last thing I wanted to leave you with, and this is something very important. It's a very sad situation. You know, I went to Loyola Law School and I had 2 classmates that fell in love and got married and had a beautiful child, and just recently had a second child. And you might have seen this in the news. It's been all over the place on ABC, Daily Mail, you know, everywhere. The child was born with a rare genetic disorder that is called the childhood Alzheimer's. It's essentially childhood Alzheimer's, where, you know, I don't want to give details of what it is. I'm going to pop a link in the show notes where you can go and watch the ABC News report and more stuff about this. But it's a debilitating disease, fatal over time. They have clinical studies right now that are working to fix this and at least let people deal with the symptoms of it, and to be able to just manage it is just, for a little baby to be going through this is awful. The parents, probably the worst thing, as bad as it gets. It just, you know, the president goes and drops 49 bombs and spends $49 million overseas and all that. That kind of money could be used for research and to cure and stuff here. But I don't want to get too political about this topic. But they have a FundMe page. It's called www.gofundme.com, Hope for Marion. Hope for Marion, spelled M-A-R-I-N. They also have a website, hopeformarion.com. Please visit it, learn about this, and help this family. They're both attorneys I went to school with, but you know, being an attorney, as you know, doesn't mean you're going to be a rich person, especially if you have a sick child that has to go fly for treatment across country every other week on a constant basis, do these intense medical procedures on clinical studies, which are super expensive. You know, my wife and I are attorneys, and with the student loan debts and everything, it doesn't mean you're a rich family just because you have 2 attorney parents. We went to private schools most of the time with law school, so there's high amount of debt, there's living costs, there's children, there's family, all this kind of stuff. They really need the help, and primarily the money goes for the clinical study of treating this disease and to help it. And you know, when they treat one disease and they fix it, that leads to ideas that treat other diseases. And a baby shouldn't be going through this. You know, as immigration attorneys, our goal is, I mean, the immigration laws are made to bring families together. That's what the INA is originally meant. You know, family reunification is the core of immigration practice. But you know, just like we use our services to bring people from across the world together here in the U.S., we could keep a family together that's here in the U.S. and keep them together in love and happiness. And it's such a cute child. If you see the video, your heart's going to break, but you're also going to fall in love with how beautiful the child is. So definitely, if you can, 10, 20, 30, 100, $500, anything you can, just go and donate or share it or like the Facebook posts and all that so other people can know about it, help this family on this tragic time so they can help the treatment and the technology necessary to cure this child and other children, so we could just live in a happy lifestyle with just a better place, especially with this family going through this tragic time. It's such a difficult thing for parents to go through. Thank you so much. I'll leave you on that note. I'm optimistic because, you know, they put this GoFundMe page for 30 days and I already got more than $50,000. So the goal is $150,000. I hope you can help them do that. I would appreciate it myself. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'll try to put out more content. My goal is to really do like a lot of content, but it's hard. So I'm doing these Sunday night ones, and I'm usually tired by Sunday night because I work every day like 10 to 12 hours a day at least. And so the last video I did, I was looking at the video and I looked like I was just falling apart. And so I got to do these probably during the day when I wake up. But I like to wait till Sunday night to get all the news I can for the week and then deliver it to you. Thank you so much for everyone who's been contacting me and listening to this. The discussions are amazing. The friendships are amazing. And we're just going to keep it going forward. So please stay in touch. My email is info@jqqlaw.com. You can email me directly at info@jqqlaw.com. The YouTube page now is youtube.com/The Immigration Lawyers Channel. We're also on iTunes with the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. And if you are an immigration attorney and want to participate in the listserv to communicate with each other, ask questions and all that, the Immigration Lawyers listserv is the place to go. It's on the site, one of these sites to go, and you can find that there. And that's it for tonight. Have a great one. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.